Does forced abortion sound crazy?
Yes.
But
And it is crazy. Like,
and it
that's
happens.
crazy.
It does happen in the
I
world.
just feel like that's not comparable to, like, in a global pandemic, asking people to get mandated, like,
You're right.
asking people to get
But
vaccinated.
does the government listening to your cell phone 24/7 sound crazy? Because prior
It
to
sounds
9/11,
boring.
it sounds
It sounds boring as hell.
uncomfortable to me, but prior to 9/11, that would have been crazy. And here we are today, and that's exactly what happens. Constant surveillance. And we are in this constant surveillance state because of what happened during 9/11, when there was this scary moment in the world and people were willing to erode some of their freedoms to feel protected and feel safe, because when people are afraid and when there is an imminent danger, that's when the most damage can be done, because people are willing to do anything to feel safe again. They're willing to give up anything to feel comfortable, to feel protected, to feel like somebody is watching out for them. And that's when the damage gets done. And that's when the foundation for later damage is laid. Is during these times. Because if the world was going great, imagine 4 years ago, right? No COVID. And they said everyone has to have a flu vaccine to go anywhere outside of their house. That would sound pretty crazy. That would be pretty crazy. For me, I would think that's crazy. Wouldn't you? If they said just out of the blue, everyone has to get vaccinated with the flu shot, or you can't leave your house. That would be pretty crazy, but that's essentially what we're doing here.
In a global pandemic.
Yes, but that is
Okay.
still.
So what you're saying is you think that the government is perpetuating mass fear
No.
to, like, pull one over on
No,
us
I
during
did
this,
not say
or
that.
like take advantage.
I did not say that.
So when you're talking about the government, like, perpetuating this fear and, like, fear
I did
mongering to
not
strip
say their
away
fear. I didn't say
freedom.
any of that. I said that this first step, though it doesn't sound crazy,
Well,
and
comparing it to, like, 9/11 and, like, you know,
no, I'm telling you what happened. We weren't being spied on with mass surveillance before 9/11. There was no TSA. We weren't scanning our we obviously we
there
didn't
was
have mail.
TSA.
Yeah, but it
before
wasn't. You
9/11.
could just get on a plane. There was no. Flying was completely different before 9/11.
There were still security checks.
Not anywhere near the level of security that we had
It's
today.
definitely different.
Yeah.
But I am wondering why you're saying that if you're not comparing the two.
Because it's what was pre 9/11 and post 9/11 is completely different. The Patriot Act opened the door for these things that nobody saw coming. For these things that nobody saw coming. For the level of surveillance that everyone should be uncomfortable with, and is when they know what is really happening. But that started when people were afraid, when we had been attacked, and people were willing to give up anything to be safe.
And so you feel like
I feel like this is a step.
mandating the vaccine is going to
step.
lead to all of those things.
I think it will lead to something bad in the future, and we will look on it like we do with that. Like, oh, wow. Now that I'm not saying necessarily that it's going to lead to forced abortions or anything, but I think people in China probably didn't think that whatever started with that led to forced abortions. Or that line of thinking is a real thing, but people don't like to look at that. They say, "Oh, this isn't crazy. This thing we're doing now, it's just you're just giving up one thing. You're forcing people to do one thing. What's the problem with that?" And maybe there's not a problem with that. But then tomorrow it can become two things, and the next day it can become three things. And maybe it's not the next day, maybe it's 20 years.
I think when we're talking about vaccines, it's different than the rest of the
But
things that you're talking
why
about.
is it? It's only different because you're on the side of the vaccine.
We already get so many vaccines. Our dogs and animals get so many vaccines
Yep.
before they can do any, like,
None that
we're
make
in a
it
culture.
so you can't leave the house. There's no vaccine right now that's on the market that you have to go into a supermarket or to go sit down at a restaurant. There's none.
You don't need a vaccine to go into a supermarket. They're talking about things where like eating at a restaurant or going to movies.
But there's no other vaccine requirement for any of that. Right? So we have all these vaccines, which are great. I'm not anti-vaccine. I have all of them. But forcing people to get one to go into a place is weird. And this is the first time we're doing that. This is the first step. And I think it could. And you know what the government is capable of because your people have experienced it. My people have experienced it. Anybody that lives in this country has experienced what the government is capable of. And I think giving the government more power should be alarming. And allowing them to say, you have to do this to be a part of society is a problem. Because who knows where it could lead? And while it might seem crazy today, might not seem crazy in 10 years when it's happening. When they're saying, "Oh, you can only have one child." And if you're pregnant with a second, I guess it's abortion or adoption. You don't get to keep that second child.
Your line of reasoning is ridiculous. First of
You
all,
say
that's
that. You
ridiculous.
say that
I
until it
do.
happens.
Okay.
If you were in China and they said you can only have one child, you'd be like, "This is crazy." But that's the law. That's the law in China. It was. They lifted it because their population was struggling, and they had way more men than women because people didn't want daughters because you could only have one child. But that sounds crazy. But that happened.
I just think that
I get it. I get it.
there's
You don't
so
see it going there, and that's okay.
I do not.
That's
I
okay.
don't think that's like a rational comparison. I think, what I do see happening without these mandates is that people aren't going to be vaccinated. This is something that it is definitely going to be endemic. This is something we're going to deal with decades because people were selfish and didn't do what they could to protect themselves and others.
But what if everyone gets vaccinated and it's still around for the next 15 years?